They built a mansion on my land while I was gone, thinking I'd never come back to claim it. 3 years overseas, and I returned to find a sprawling estate where my grandfather's trees once stood, my trees. I'm still reeling from it. Standing there in the middle of what used to be a quiet forest, staring at this gaudy monstrosity with its marble pillars and three-car garage. How do you even process something like that? I'm Ethan Parker, by the way, and this is the story of how I took on the neighborhood tyrant everyone calls HOA Karen, and won. If you're watching this, drop a comment below and let me know. What would you do if someone stole your land right under your nose? It started with a letter. I'd just gotten back from a work contract in Seattle, 3 years managing a tech rollout for a big company up there. I was jet-lagged, crashing in my tiny apartment in Austin when the mail came. Among the bills and junk was a faded envelope from my granddad's lawyer. I ripped it open, coffee sloshing onto the counter, and there it was, a deed to 12 acres of woodland outside Cedar Hills, Texas. My granddad, George Parker, had left it to me when he passed 5 years ago, but I hadn't known the details until that moment. I ran my fingers over the official seal, whispering, "Holy crap, I own land." I couldn't wait to see it. My boss wasn't thrilled when I asked for a week off, especially since I just signed on for another project, but this was bigger than deadlines. I hit the road that weekend, driving 4 hours from Austin to Cedar Hills, a sleepy town just far enough from the city to feel like another world. The GPS led me down winding backroads until I hit a gravel path swallowed by towering pines. A handwritten sign nailed to a tree read, "Parker Property, Keep Out," and Granddad's shaky scrawl. I smiled, remembering summers spent fishing with him by the creek that cut through those woods. But as I hiked deeper in, something felt off. The air buzzed with noise, machinery, voices, the clatter of construction. That's when I saw it. Beyond the tree line, where the forest should have stretched unbroken, stood a half-finished mansion. Workers swarmed the site, laying brick and hauling lumber, while a woman in designer sunglasses barked orders at a gravel truck. She looked like she'd stepped out of a reality TV show, blonde, polished, and loud. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just near my land. This was on it. I checked the old survey markers Granddad had shown me as a kid, rusted stakes with yellow caps, and sure enough, they were 150 feet behind her construction zone. This was my property, and she was building her dream house right on top of it. "Excuse me," I called, stepping out of the trees. She turned, her eyebrows shooting up over those sunglasses like I was a bug she'd just noticed. "This is a private site," she snapped. "And this is my land." I shot back, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm Ethan Parker, and you're trespassing." Her smile vanished. "You must be mistaken," she said, voice icy. "This plot belongs to Cedar Hills Estates HOA. I'm Lisa Bennett, vice president. We bought this fair and square." I frowned. I never sold anything to anyone. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound, and waved me off. "Take it up with our president, Tom Reynolds. We've got lawyers who'll bury you." I retreated to my car, my mind racing. That night, back at the motel in town, I couldn't sleep. I dug out Granddad's deed and pored over the coordinates. Everything matched. This wasn't a mistake. This was theft. The next morning, I called a surveyor, paying double for a rush job. 3 days later, he confirmed it. Lisa's mansion sat 100% on my 12 acres. Someone had moved the markers while I was in Seattle. And when I called the HOA to complain, Tom Reynolds used fake charm over the phone. "Let's meet, Ethan. I'm sure we can sort this little mix-up." But a text from an unknown number came right after. "Back off, or you'll regret it. LB." I stared out the motel window at the lights of her construction site blazing through the trees. This wasn't just about land anymore. This was personal. Meanwhile, across town, Lisa was sipping wine at a Cedar Hills Estates board meeting, bragging about her new estate to Tom and their lawyer, Greg Patel. "The guy's been gone for years," she said, swirling her glass. "He'll fold once he sees the paperwork." Tom nodded, smirking. "We've got this locked down. No one's stopping progress." They had no idea I was already planning my next move, one that would flip their perfect little world upside down. I wasn't about to let Lisa Bennett and her HOA crony steamroll me. That smug laugh of hers echoed in my head, lighting a fire I didn't know I had. My granddad spent his life protecting this land, 12 acres of Texas wilderness that held every memory of my childhood, and now she thought she could slap a mansion on it and call it hers? No way. I stormed into the Cedar Hills County Records office the next morning, my heart pounding like a drum. The clerk, a sweet older lady named Betty, recognized Granddad's name right away. "George Parker was a stubborn one," she said with a wink. refused every developer who came sniffing around. I slid the deed across her desk. Then wise Lisa Bennett building on his land. Betty's eyes narrowed as she typed into her ancient computer. Minutes felt like hours, my palms sweating as I paced the dusty room. Then she gasped. "This can't be right," she muttered, spinning the screen toward me. "Says here your granddad requested a boundary change 2 years ago." I nearly choked. "He died 5 years ago, Betty. Someone faked this." Her face went pale. "That's fraud, Ethan. Big time." I clenched my fists, adrenaline surging. They didn't just steal my land. They forged his name to do it. That was a gut punch I wouldn't forgive. I hired a lawyer that afternoon, Sarah Brooks, a no-nonsense woman who'd taken down shady HOAs before. She met me at a diner off Highway 71, her laptop already open. "They've got guts," she said, scanning the surveyor's report. "Moved the markers, falsified records, and sold it to Lisa for her dream home. We've got them dead to rights." I leaned forward, voice low. "I want that house gone, Sarah. Every brick of it." She grinned. "Then we need leverage, something they can't ignore." That's when I remembered Granddad's old lockbox. I'd hauled it from Austin in my trunk, unopened since his funeral. Back at the motel, I pried it open, papers spilling everywhere. Buried under tax forms was a yellowed document that stopped my heart, a utility easement contract from 1982. Granddad had sold electrical rights to the local power company, but here's the kicker. He'd added a clause. Those rights couldn't be transferred without offering them back to his heirs first. Me. I called Sarah at midnight, practically shouting, "I've got something. They need my permission to run power to Cedar Hills Estates." She laughed. "Ethan, you just found their Achilles heel." The next day, I drove to Lone Star Power's office in San Marcos, 45 minutes away, my hands shaking on the wheel. The rep, a guy named Carlos, looked baffled when I slapped the contract on his desk. "Nobody's touched these rights in decades," he said. "They're in limbo. Yours if you want him." Every penny I had, savings, retirement, even my emergency fund, went into buying them. $42,000. Was it crazy? Maybe. But as I signed the papers, I pictured Lisa's smug face and those oaks she'd ripped out of my land. This wasn't just a purchase. This was war. Meanwhile, at Lisa's construction site, she was sipping iced tea on her half-built patio, oblivious. "He's got nothing," she told Tom over the phone, her voice dripping with confidence. "Some nobody from Austin? Please. We'll crush him." Tom chuckled from his golf course in downtown Cedar Hills. "Greg's drafting a cease and desist as we speak. He'll be begging to settle by next week." They toasted to their victory, the hum of power lines overhead a sound they took for granted. Little did they know, I'd just bought the key to turning their lights off. I couldn't sleep that night, the utility contract burning a hole in my mind. Owning the electrical easement rights to Cedar Hills Estates wasn't just a legal win. It was a loaded gun, and I was ready to pull the trigger. My granddad's woods were worth more than Lisa Bennett's ego or Tom Reynolds' bank account, and I'd make them feel it. The next morning, I met Sarah at her office in Austin, my pulse racing as I handed her the papers. "This is gold, Ethan," she said, her eyes gleaming. "They built that mansion assuming power was a given. Without your sign-off, they're dead in the water." I grinned, a rush of hope flooding me. "So what's our move?" She leaned back, tapping her pen. "We hit them with a formal notice. Remove the house from your land in 30 days, or we maintain the easement by cutting their power. Indefinitely." My jaw dropped. "You're serious?" She nodded. "Dead serious. They'll either cave or crumble." I could already picture Lisa's face when the lights went out. Priceless. We drafted the notice that afternoon, and by 5 p.m., certified letters were on their way to Lisa, Tom, Greg Patel, and every HOA board member. My hands shook as I watched the courier drive off. This was real now. No turning back. 2 days later, all hell broke loose. Tom showed up at my motel, his BMW screeching into the lot. He stormed up, red-faced, waving the notice like it was a weapon. "This is insane, Parker," he yelled. "You can't cut our power over a lousy acre." I stepped onto the porch, heart hammering but voice steady. "You built on my land, Tom. You've had 3 years to enjoy it. Now you've got 30 days to fix it." He jabbed a finger at me. "You'll drown in lawsuits. We've got the best attorneys in Texas." I shrugged. "And I've got the law and the power grid. Good luck." That night, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Angry text from unknown numbers, probably Lisa's minions, mixed with an email from Greg Patel titled, Urgent. Settlement offer. $50,000 to drop it all. I laughed out loud, alone in that dim motel room. Did they think I'd sell Granddad's legacy for pocket change? Then came the threats. A note slipped under my door. Accidents happen out here. Watch yourself, LB. My stomach twisted, but it only fueled me more. They were scared. Good. Meanwhile, across town, Lisa was pacing her unfinished mansion, heels clicking on the bare concrete. He's bluffing, she hissed to Greg over a glass of Chardonnay. No judge will let him touch our power. Greg frowned, flipping through my notice. He's got the easement, Lisa. If he pushes this, we're screwed. She slammed her glass down. Then bury him in paperwork. Call in favors. I'm not losing my house to some tree-hugging nobody. Down the street, Tom was on the phone with the mayor's office, begging for a loophole. There's got to be a way, he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. We can't let this punk win. Back at the motel, I wasn't celebrating yet. Day 10 hit, and construction crews doubled down on Lisa's site, racing to finish like it'd make a difference. I drove out to watch, my chest tight with fury as another oak crashed to the ground. That's when I met Nancy Miller, an older woman who'd lived in Cedar Hills Estates for 25 years. She approached me by the tree line, her voice soft but firm. They've pulled stunts like this before, she said. Took half my garden 5 years back, called it common area. You're not alone, Ethan. Her words hit hard, hope and rage tangling inside me. I wasn't just fighting for me anymore. By day 15, the HOA tried a new tactic. A neighbor I'd never met, some guy in a Porsche claiming to be Lisa's brother, knocked on my door. You're messing with the wrong people, he growled. Lisa and Tom run this town. Back off, or you'll wish you had. I stared him down, adrenaline pumping. Tell them to start packing. He left, tires squealing, but Nancy's voice echoed in my head. This wasn't just a house. It was a power trip, and I was about to flip the switch. Day 29 hit like a freight train, and I was running on fumes, coffee, adrenaline, and pure stubbornness. The HOA hadn't budged. Lisa's mansion stood finished now, a gleaming monument to their arrogance, lights blazing every night like a middle finger pointed straight at me. I'd given them 30 days to tear it down, and they'd spent every second laughing in my face. Well, time's up. I stood on my motel balcony, watching the horizon glow from Cedar Hills Estates, my phone clutched tight. At exactly 8:59 a.m., I called Carlos at Lone Star Power. Do it, I said, my voice shaking with something between fear and triumph. Cut the grid. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, those distant lights flickered and died. 5 houses went dark, Lisa's mansion, Tom's colonial, and 3 others tied to the same line. My heart slammed against my ribs. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. The silence was deafening, no hum of AC units, no pool pumps, just crickets singing in the void. My phone exploded seconds later. Furious text from Tom, you'll pay for this. And a voicemail from Greg Patel, his calm lawyer voice cracking. Cease this now, or we'll see you into next year. I didn't reply. Let them scream into the dark. By noon, chaos erupted. News vans rolled into Cedar Hills, cameras swarming the HOA office. I drove out to watch from a distance, my chest tight with a mix of dread and pride. Lisa stormed out of her mansion, hair wild, yelling at a reporter who dared knock on her door. This is harassment, she shrieked, waving her phone like it had magically turned the power back on. Tom wasn't far behind, cornering me in the motel lot an hour later, his face a mask of desperation. You're ruining families, he barked. Lisa's got a gala tonight, food's rotting in her fridge. I crossed my arms, fire in my veins. Should have thought of that before you stole my land, Tom. Hotels have generators. Figure it out. Meanwhile, inside Lisa's dark mansion, she was unraveling. Call the governor if you have to. She snapped at Greg, who was hunched over legal papers by candlelight. He can't do this. It's my house. Greg rubbed his temples. He owns the easement, Lisa. The judge denied our injunction. We're out of moves unless you start dismantling. She threw a wine glass against the wall, glass shattering across the marble floor as she bragged about at her housewarming. I'd rather die than give him the satisfaction. Back at the motel, I wasn't alone anymore. Nancy Miller showed up with a thermos of tea and a story that lit a spark in me. They've bullied everyone here for years, she said, her voice trembling with old anger. My husband fought them over our garden, died of a heart attack during the stress. You're the first to hit back this hard. Her words sank deep, heavy with loss and hope. I wasn't just fighting for Granddad's trees. I was fighting for everyone they'd crushed. That night, social media lit up. Residents posted about HOA scams, secret fines, rigged votes, favors for Tom's buddies. The tide was turning. Day 31 brought a knock at my door. Tom's wife, Claire, looking frazzled in a wrinkled sundress. "Please, Ethan," she begged, tears streaking her mascara. "Our daughter's scared. She can't sleep without her nightlight. Turn it back on." My gut twisted. I hated this part, the collateral damage, but I held firm. "Tell Tom to sign the agreement. The house comes down, the power goes back on." She glared at me, then left, gravel crunching under her heels. I sank onto the bed, guilt gnawing at me. Was I going too far? Then my phone buzzed. "Sarah?" "They're cracking," she said. "Emergency meeting tomorrow. Be ready." Across town, the HOA board huddled in their powerless community center, flashlights casting shadows on sweaty faces. Lisa was MIA, but Tom faced a rebellion. "We can't live like this," shouted a board member named Helen. "He's got us by the throat. Cut a deal." Tom slammed his fist on the table. "We don't negotiate with blackmailers." But his voice shook. They didn't know I'd be walking into that meeting with everything I needed to end this, once and for all. The Cedar Hills Community Center was a pressure cooker at 7 a.m., packed with residents who'd heard the whispers of an emergency HOA meeting. I walked in with Sarah, my stomach in knots, but my resolve steel hard. The air smelled of sweat and desperation. No power, no AC, just battery-powered fans whirring uselessly. Tom sat at the head table, bags under his eyes, flanked by a grim-faced Greg Patel. Lisa was nowhere in sight, and that sent a jolt through me. Where was she? Nancy Miller caught my eye from the crowd, giving me a nod that steadied my nerves. This was it, folks, the final showdown. If you've stuck with me this far, hit that subscribe button. I've got a wild ending for you. Helen, the board member who'd snapped last night, stood up first. "We've got no lights, no fridge, no peace," she yelled, glaring at Tom. "Sign his damn deal, or I'm out." Murmurs rippled through the room, some angry, some hopeful. Sarah slid our terms across the table. "Dismantle Lisa's house in 60 days. HOA pays, property line restored, compensation for my trees and their harassment." Tom's hands shook as he read it, his jaw tight. "This'll gut our funds," he croaked. Claire, sitting beside him, spoke up, her voice raw. "Then it's on us for letting it get this far." That's when Nancy took the mic, her silver hair glinting under the emergency lights. "I've lived here 25 years, she said, her tone cutting through the chaos. "Tom and Lisa have bullied us all, stolen land, bent rules, ignored us. Ethan's the first to fight back. We should thank him." The room erupted, claps, shouts, a few curses. A guy in the back yelled, "What about Lisa's house? She's not even here." Sarah leaned close. "Rumor is she's bailing. Moving trucks spotted at her place." My heart raced. Was she running? Tom tried to rally. "We can fight this in court," he barked, but Greg cut him off. "We won't win, Tom. He's got the easement, the deed, everything. It's over." The crowd turned on him then. Residents I'd never met, fed up with years of HOA tyranny. "Resign," someone shouted. Tom's face crumpled, and in that moment, I saw a man broken, not the smug kingpin who'd threatened me weeks ago. Sarah whispered, "They're folding. Push now." I stood, voice steady despite the adrenaline. "Sign it today, start dismantling tomorrow, and I'll call off the power cut. That's the deal." Hours ticked by, tense, sweaty hours of arguing and pleading. Outside, news crews filmed the dark mansions, waiting for a scoop. My phone buzzed. Carlos from Lone Star Power. "City's leaning on us hard, Ethan. How long?" I texted back, "Soon. Hold tight." Finally, at 1 p.m., Tom caved. He signed, hands trembling, then stood. "I resign," he muttered, voice barely audible. The room cheered, wild, ragged cheers. Nancy was named interim president on the spot, and I felt a weight lift I hadn't known I'd been carrying. 2 days later, I watched from my new cabin, built on my land, as crews began taking Lisa's mansion apart. Not tearing it down, but dismantling it piece by piece, like Nancy suggested. Materials for the community center, a win for everyone. I'd sold the easement back to Cedar Hills at cost, with a catch. 5% of HOA fees now fund local conservation. No one's building on my woods again. Lisa? Word is she sold her other properties and bolted to Florida. Tom's a ghost now. Claire left him, took the kid. Karma's quiet, but it hits hard. Meanwhile, across town, Nancy hosted a tree planting day. Volunteers, some from that meeting, dug holes for saplings where Lisa's foundation once Saturday. This is yours again, Nancy told me, handing me a shovel. I planted an oak, dirt under my nails, and felt Granddad there with me, his land, his fight, his victory. The forest would grow back, wild and free, just like he'd wanted. 5 years on, I'm still here. Built a deck overlooking the spot where Lisa's house stood. Now it's all green, alive with birds and wildflowers. I bring my niece out sometimes, tell her the story, not about revenge, but about standing up when it counts. The best part? It's not that I won. It's that something better grew in the wreckage. Granddad would have loved that. So, what do you think? Drop a comment. Would you have fought like I did? Let's keep this conversation going.